Hello and welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another live broadcast. I'll be joined by my daughter-in-law, Joy Garcia. We'll be doing our once a month Ask Me Anything show. Joy, are you there?
Yes, I am. Super
Okay,
excited to be
great.
here.
Yeah, and it's always fun to answer all the questions from the listening audience and to see what people are interested in and what kind of topics they are most inquisitive about. And so I always enjoy answering and, just getting a pulse of what is going through people's minds and what they're focused on in their study. And so let's begin.
Sounds good. Today is our 56th episode of the Ask Me Anything series, and we started in 2019. I just can't believe that we're already 56 episodes in. But I'm really grateful and excited that the questions keep flooding in, and I want to make
Right?
sure to make as much time as possible to get to all of these questions. So I'll go ahead and open us up in prayer, and let's get started.
All right, sounds good.
Father, we thank you so much for bringing us here once again, another month. We're so grateful for this opportunity to exist, to live, and to do as much as we can for your kingdom, Father. We're so grateful for this opportunity to fellowship with our community, our beautiful truth-seeking community that is just so in love with you. And we ask that you would give wisdom to Zen tonight as he speaks and as he answers these questions. And we're so grateful for the people in chat, and we ask that you would give them wisdom to um, listen and find more questions to ask in the chat. And we're so grateful for your love, salvation through you. And in Yahushua's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, first question of the night is from Tom. Is there scripture that supports the idea that Rosh Chodesh is not counted in the 7-day week cycle? Genesis is pretty straightforward. The seventh day was the Sabbath and God's day of rest. So is there scripture in the Torah that explains the Enochian concept?
Yes, there is. And actually, this is something that I was writing about in the introduction that I did for Diane's book. And this story is confirmation that not only was this calendar reestablished during the Exodus, but as I included in one of the quotes in that introduction, in the Perkei Rabbi Eleazar, it speaks about intercalation and how this knowledge was passed down and first given to Adam. And if you don't know what intercalation is, it's how the 354-day lunar calendar meshes with the 364-day solar calendar. So that, according to the metatonic cycle, you have to add a 13th month every third year or so, which is called Adar number 2. And you do this in order for Passover to remain in alignment with the barley harvest and festival. Because it's during the 16th of Nisan on the Feast of First Fruits that the high priest waves the barley sheaf as a sin offering for Israel. And giving thanks for the harvest, the Israelites then began to eat of the new crop. And it's not until they bring their offering to the temple and the high priest waves a barley sheep in thanksgiving to the Most High for the abundance that the new crop is then partaken of. And if you don't have the barley in, ready as far as the harvest, then you're not able to celebrate Passover. And so you have to add this 13th month. But anyways, there's a story the in the Exodus account where the Israelites are commanded to march for 7 days around Jericho, and that on the seventh day the trumpets and the voice of the Israelites in shout would bring the walls down, and then they would be able to. Um, Actually, I should probably bring that up since we're talking about it. But it would be that shout and that march which would bring down the walls of Jericho. We know that according to God's command to honor the Sabbath, that if Sabbath was once in every 7 days, he would actually be breaking his commandment to honor and revere the Sabbath. And he would be telling the Israelites to march on Sabbath. And so, unless you understand that this particular occurrence um, actually began on Rosh Chodesh of the second month, and that the first day of the march was on the day of the appearance of the waxing crescent, which is excluded from the 7 day count of, the other 4 7 day weeks, and that the Sabbaths are aligned with the first quarter full, third quarter, and lunar conjunctive moon. And that's why the phases of the moon and the cycles of the moon, the Rosh Chodesh is always um, indicated by the appearance of the waxing crescent. And this day being excluded from the 7 day account of the following 4 weeks, that's how the lunar calendar and Yah's calendar actually stays in alignment and determines Sabbath. And so I'll read this from the book of Jasher, and you'll see how it is that it's only if the Israelites were following this particular calendar that they would not be breaking Sabbath. And indeed, this story is verification as to the premise that both Diane and myself, we believe without a doubt that the Enochian lunar solar and especially the seasonal calendar is the calendar of Yah, and that it was the calendar which was given to Adam, lost during the time of after Joseph, and restored to Moshe and Aaron during the Exodus. And I'll share a passage that confirms that as well. In the book of Jasher, it says, "And it was in the second month, on the first day of the month, that Yahweh or Yahuwah said to Joshua, Rise up, behold, I have given Jericho into thy hand, with all the people thereof, and all your fighting men shall go round the city once each day. Thus ye shall do for 6 days. And on the seventh day they went round the city 7 times, and the priests blew upon the trumpets." And so you can see from this story that it confirms that they began their 7 day march on the first day of the second month, which is, of course, Rosh Chodesh, for the month of Iyar. And so it began on Rosh Chodesh. It continued for these 6 days, the 6 working days. And then we have on the lunar calendar that the 8th is the first quarter Sabbath. And so it's on that day that they actually rested and celebrated their conquest of the city. And so, again, this particular story confirms that this is the calendar that they were going by. Now, I'll share with you a passage. Well, I'll share 2 passages actually. One is from the Perkdi Rabbi Eleazar, and this confirms that this is the calendar which was given to and used by Adam and by all of the generations following Adam, that they had taught the knowledge of intercalation, which again, intercalation is how to mesh and bring together the lunar and the solar calendar. You can go to chapter 9 in the Perkti Rabbi Eleazar for the full, but I'm just going to read a portion. All right. This is the latter part. It says, when Joseph and his brethren died, the intercalations ceased from Israel in Egypt, as it is said, and Joseph died and all his brethren and all that generation. Just as the intercalations were diminished from the Israelites in the land of Egypt, likewise in the future will the intercalations be diminished at the end of the fourth kingdom. We're in that kingdom, and this indeed has happened. The knowledge of this calendar has again been lost. Until Elijah be he remembered for good shall come. And Elijah is one of the two witnesses of Revelation 11. He and Enoch will return to convict the Antichrist. And the knowledge of the calendar will come to light again in that time and in that day. And I think the work that Diana and I are doing are part of that process. Just as the Holy One, blessed be He, was revealed to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, likewise in the future will He be revealed to them at the end of the fourth kingdom. As it is said, and the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. What is the significance of the word saying, say to them, till now the principle of intercalation was with me. Henceforth it is your right to intercalate thereby the year. Thus were the Israelites wont to intercalate the year in the Holy Land. When they were exiled to Babylon, they intercalated the year through those who were left in the Holy Land. And when they were all exiled and they were not any Jews left in the Holy Land, they intercalated the year in Babylon. And so, again, even up to the time of the destruction of the temple, it tells you that they were using the Enochian lunar solar calendar. I'll share one other passage that this is found in the Aramaic, the Targum of Ecclesiastes, and it's called the Book of Colette, which Colette is the name of Solomon. And it says in this particular manuscript as well, see, this is a new thing, but already it was of old in former days, which were before now. The former generations have no remembrance, and also the latter ones who will have no remembrance, with the generations who will be in the last days of the Messiah. When King Solomon of Israel was sitting on his royal throne, his heart became very proud because of his wealth, and he transgressed the decree of the Memra of the Lord. He gathered many forces, chariots, and calori. He collected much silver and gold. He married among foreign peoples immediately. The anger of the Lord grew strong against him, and therefore he sent Ashmedai, king of the demons, against him, who drove him from his royal throne and took his signet ring from his hand, so that he would wander and go into exile, into the world to chastise them. He went about in all the districts and towns of the land of Israel. He wept, pleaded, and said, I am who was previously named Solomon. I was king over Israel and Jerusalem. In this particular passage, he also says, I acquired male and female slaves from the children of Ham and other foreign peoples. I had 12 stewards who were in charge of food for my household for the 12 months of the year, and one to provide for the intercalated month. And so he makes mention here of the intercalated month, which is the 13th month. And so even during the time of Solomon, they were following and using a calendar that intercalated every once in a while, had this 13th month. And so, and this is the footnote that comes with this particular passage as well. It says, 7 times in 19-year cycle is the second month of Adar added to the Hebrew calendar to ensure that Passover remains in the spring. And so, there's so much information that once you begin to read and study from the other manuscripts, it becomes clear that without a doubt, the Enochian lunar solar calendar is the calendar that they went by. I'll share one more thing and then we'll move on from this. Just to confirm again that this was the teaching that was given to Adam. It says that on the 28th of Elul, the sun and the moon were created. The number of the years, months, days, nights, terms, season, cycles, and intercalation were before the Holy One, blessed be He. And He intercalated the years, and afterwards He delivered the calculations to the first man in the Garden of Eden. As it is said, this is the calculation for the generations of Adam. The calculations of the world is therein for the generations of the children of Adam. Adam handed on the tradition to Enoch, who was initiated in the principle of intercalation, and he intercalated the year. As it is said, and Enoch walked with God. Enoch walked in the ways of the calculation concerning the world which God had delivered to Adam. And Enoch delivered the principle of intercalation to Noah, and he was initiated into the principle of intercalation, and he intercalated the year. And it just goes on and on. Noah handed on to the tradition to Shem. Shem intercalated the years. He was called a priest, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, and he passed it on to Abraham. And so, if you want to read the fullness of this quote, which is very long, as I said, you can read it in the Perk de Rabbi Eleazar. It's chapter 8, the principle of intercalation.
Thank you. And I'll add the link to that Perk de Eleazar in the chat. And
also, Joy,
yeah.
that particular quote, the one that I'm referring to, is the quote that is connected to our Enochian calendar. So when people look up our calendar on sacredwordpublishing.com, they'll find this particular quote on that page as well.
Oh, cool. Okay. I will also add the Enochian calendar link into the chat. Just FYI, you can go there each month, and the Enochian calendar is updated there, so you can check it out for free each month. Or if you really want a printed version, you can also purchase that on the website as well and support us. But with that, let's move on to the next question from Maggie. Are there any extra biblical texts or books of Zen's that give a more detailed historical account of John the Baptist?
Yes. In the Great Commission too, there's a lot of manuscripts that are not included, of course, in the canonical material. But you find many stories about John the Baptist in the Ante-Nicene Creed, which are the dialogues that the church fathers had when they were trying to determine which books to place into and make part of the canon. And there's 10 very thick volumes of their dialogues and their discussions. And in those dialogues and discussions, there are literally preserved probably hundreds of extra biblical manuscripts that most people don't know about. And in our Great Commission series, the Acts and the Gospels of the Apostles, um, books 1, 2, and 3. The first two include, like the book of Acts in the Bible, the stories of the apostles as they go out two by two, and they go to different parts of the land, and they are inspired, where people hear them speaking in tongues. They actually learned the language of the areas that they were going to, and they learned how to communicate with the people so that they could um, basically inspire them with the gospel and convert them to the faith. And so these are stories that again are not known, but are preserved and shared in the extra biblical manuscripts, which make up the first two books of the Great Commission. And in the second book, there are numerous accounts of John the Baptist, even about how one of the kings tried to poison him, and the poison would take no effect. And because of that, he was exiled to the Isle of Patmos, which is where he received the revelation that is in our Bible. But anyways, and then the third book of the Great Commission series is on the end time apocalypses, and is specific to the fig tree generation and to the end of days and what would happen in the times that we are living. Even Enoch wrote about us in chapter 1 of the first book of Enoch when he spoke about a distant and remote generation and how he was writing for the people of that time.
Awesome. Thank you, Zen. I also forgot to mention when you were talking about the Enochian calendar on that first question, I just want to remind everyone that Diane Cover and I are really working hard to try to get her onto the classes. So at swpclass.com, you can keep track of when we actually get that live, so that for those who are really interested in learning the Enochian calendar and how it works, you can, talk with her live and ask her questions and kind of do a deeper dive into it. So definitely look forward to that as well. And with that, we'll move on to the next question from Patty. Will you please tell us where the scripture is that says that Satan is required to tell us what he is going to do against us?
That's not a biblical passage or a tenet. That's more a New World Order protocols of the learned elders of Zion. There could be something, as far as in the extra biblical manuscripts, which state that that particular premise, but that's more of an Illuminati, that they boast and basically challenge us to stop them. And if they say what they're going to do, then they're not held to account, and it's not sinful. And so, yeah, that's I would look to the Illuminati secret covenant and the protocols, which we put out, and you can read about that stuff in there.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question from Brian. I've heard that the garments that Yah gave Adam and Eve is actually the skin that we have on our body currently, not animal skins. Have you heard this before as well, and what are your thoughts?
Well, I do believe that initially the loss of the bright nature and their loss of immortality, that the transition into, and when they were placed under the authority of death, that certainly that was the human mortal flesh form. However, the garments of power were a clothing that the Most High gave to them, and gave him, Adam as well, the rod of wonder, the staff of God, when he was exiled from paradise. So that's something that's different than the skin of our flesh.
Thank you. Next question is from Jay. I'm trying to figure out how to explain to atheists, since I used to be one, how the Bible can be logically proven. I really have a hard time figuring out how to prove just the basic archaeology and time frame of why the Bible would be true or written in a time frame which would make sense, or the prediction of his birth 4,000 years from the Old Testament to the New Testament. Should I move? I'll hold off and read the question after the break.
Yeah. We'll be right back, everyone.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
There were giants in the land, and the sons of the angels of God looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives, and their sons became of old great men of renown. So they have been mixing with us on a genetic level since the time of Enoch and Ezekiel's will.
Here on Earth, we're intrigued by the sun, moon, and stars, and imagine there's got to be planets like ours. So conceive of a face on the surface of Mars, so in need of a meaning and purpose we lost. And indeed, they believe that the these might be our gods, or that maybe with time we'll do right and evolve and eventually reach what they seek and then solve all the problems of man. But they really don't know that they all in the works of our hands are but just filthy rags. So we travel the lands to dig up our past time, our lapses, and with it are much of the facts. And imagine that gods came in alien class.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for a second portion. I'll turn it back over to you, Joy.
Sure, I'll reread that question from the beginning from Jay. I'm trying to figure out how to explain to atheists, since I used to be one, how the Bible can be logically proven. I really have a hard time figuring out how to prove just the basic archaeology and time frame of why the Bible would be true or written in a time frame which would make sense, or the prediction of his birth 4,000 years from the Old Testament to the New Testament. I just really want to find out resources which I can find to know more about this, so that I might be able to teach others who otherwise would have a completely closed mind.
Well, I recommend the Archico volume and the letters of Pontius Pilate to Tiberius Caesar. But if you've not heard the series that we've done on the Archico volume and what it's about, it actually captures the eyewitness testimony of the Sanhedrin as they go out and interview. For instance, Gamaliel goes out and interviews the people that are closest to Yahushua and that knew him best, including Martha, Mary Magdala, and Lazarus. We know the story of Lazarus' resurrection and how Christ waited 4 days before going there, and it was to glorify the Most High, and also his being the Son of God, and that he has the powers of over life and death and resurrection. But anyways, it also has Gamaliel, who was the teacher to Saul of Tarsus, and that became a believer himself. His brother Nicodemus and Joseph were the ones that begged for and prepared, the body of Christ for burial, and used Joseph of Arimathea's tomb. And there's also the interviews that Gamaliel conducted with the parents, both Joseph and Mary, about his demeanor and about how he was already, as a youth and as a child, already understood his role and was so knowledgeable about everything in the creation, because of course he created it, that they were unable to find a teacher to instruct him, even at 4 years of age. And it also contains the stories of the shepherds and those that were witness in Bethlehem to his immaculate conception, and how the angels made appearance and the heavens sang with glory, and it all was heard by the residents in Bethlehem. And then it also contains the stories of Caiaphas and Ananias and Pontius Pilate and his reports and what he had witnessed as far as the passion and the crucifixion and the resurrection. The soldiers that were paid to lie about his resurrection. And so this is where I would begin if you are wanting accurate historical accounts of what went down in the days that Christ was incarnate in the flesh and here upon the earth, and even after his resurrection. Now, as far as, trying to convince atheists or others, I think that one should plant seeds, but not waste a lot of time trying to convince others, especially if they're not willing to listen. If they are and they will hear you and they will actually allow you to speak and pay attention to what you're saying, then yes, engage them in conversation and share the stories of the Archico volume, and also, the extra biblical narratives, especially the infancy gospels, because, these stories show that without a doubt, even in the time that he was a babe, that Mary was already healing people with his bathwater, with his swaddling clothes, and that he, even as a youth, understood prophecy and his role, his mission in coming into flesh form. And so those are the two things that I recommend sharing most, because they convey without question, the idea of his dominion and his divine providence. Um, and so those stories could be used to not only indicate that, but also to portray that, and to share that with others. But, again, when people aren't willing to listen, I think it's unnecessary to force a discussion, and that one can use that time better in, speaking with others that are willing to hear, willing to listen. And that if you just try to force people to accept the gospel or to hear your testimony, a lot of times they're not willing to listen anyways. And so, why bother? Yeah, I think we're here to do the work, but, I think it also, the Bible tells us to not throw pearls before swine. And, when it comes to forcing people to try to hear and to learn and to understand, we're just here to plant seeds, in my opinion.
Thank you, Zen. And I would love to add that Justin and I started a channel called Endgen, spelled ENDGEN, and it's pretty much our main focus, other than gardening as well, but is kind of geared towards logic-based faith. And all of us, all three of us really, at some point coming from atheism, it took a lot for us to really get to the point where we saw the legitimacy in Christ, and all the studies that specifically I know Justin did, where he did archaeological, like where he pulled from archaeology, history, all this kind of stuff. So we have videos to like top 5 responses atheists give Christians, things like the secular biblical sources that support Christ and everything. So if you are interested in how to share the gospel with atheists and different tactics and resources, feel free to check out Endgen, ENDGEN, and hopefully that will help. We love talking about that kind of stuff. So, but with that, we'll move on to the next question from Donald. I was wondering if you could send me a link to the information you put out in your YouTube videos regarding the book of Adam and Ua from the Thracian Chronicles video series. If you have a PDF on the 68 chapters of the book as well, that would be greatly appreciated.
I'm sorry, I can't. And it's only because I gave my word to the Thracian church not to share that information in print until it is released by them. And so even though I do have copies, I'm unable to share them. We did make all of those chapters and all of those stories, and even the Chronicles of Longinus and the portions of the Book of Navi available. But I can't give them out in print. And it's only, again, I made a promise not to do so, and I will honor that. But my hope is that they will, because the work should have already have been done. According to them, it should have been completed last March, but still nothing with regard to the English translations of the Thracian chronicles. I will reach out and ask again as to if there's, a date for their release or a projected date. But until then, I'm honored, bound by my word to not share those. And so I apologize, but it is what it is.
Thank you. Next question is from Alto. What do you do with the scriptures in the Tanakh that make mention of the oath Yahweh made to his servant David, that one of his seed would sit upon his throne forever, and that it's from father to son in the Tanakh? Not only that, only Matthew and Luke ever make mention of this virgin birth. But elsewhere in the New Testament, like in Acts, Romans, and 1 Timothy, it states Yeshua was of the seed of David using the Greek sperma meaning, and then they have parentheses, male sperm. This is an impossibility unless Joseph and Miriam had sex to bring this about. How would you go about this then? Does not the virgin birth break the oath made by Yahweh to David?
No, it does not. And Christ is and was immaculately conceived. Joseph was an elderly man. His children were older than Mary. And again, if you want to know more, you have to read the infancy Gospels. But Mary was both of the Aaronic priesthood as well as of the line of Judah. And so Christ was the fulfillment. He was both priest, king, and prophet. And we see this in the manuscript on the priesthood of Jesus Christ, which is contained in full in the book that Justin published on the word of the Lord in a comparative analysis of the hidden memra. And I've read it and shared it in other stories as well. But it's also confirmation of Yahushua being of the stem of Jesse, that he was the fulfillment of that prophecy as well. The stem of Jesse, Jesse being the father of King David, and that it would be Christ who would be the true king, Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and that he would come in second advent and actually take his judgment seat and bring everybody before him. And at that time, every knee shall bow, every tongue confess. I recommend that people study more, again, than just the 66 books of the canon, because when you do so, it becomes clear and without a doubt. Even reading the Gospel of Nicodemus, they speak about at the end of the portion on Christ's descent into hell, they bring Pontius Pilate into the temple, clear everybody else out, and then explain how he was without a doubt the Son of God and the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies. And then they beg Pontius Pilate to not share this knowledge because they're in fear of being lynched by the Israelites. And so they knew as well. And you can also read in that story on the priesthood of Jesus Christ that it shares the story of how the Jews and the rabbis and the high the high priests and those that made up the Sanhedrin, they all knew that he had fulfilled this role and that he had completed these oracles, but they hid it, and they hid it at the detriment of the Israelites and even the world today. And that's why there's still so much confusion. I would also add that if people read and study the Aramaic Targum version of the Pentateuch, the Tanakh, that it will become clear that, again, without a doubt, that the word of the Lord is the visible manifestation of what is, said to be the lesser Yahweh, and that Yahuwah in heaven, that he's considered the greater Yahweh. But they are one. The Father and the Son are one. And even in the stories of like Hagar in her dealings with the angel of the Lord in the desert, it's clear that this was Yahushua. And all throughout the scriptures, more than 200 times in the Pentateuch alone, there are accounts speaking about and talking about Christ and how he fulfilled the oracles. But again, this stuff has been removed and hidden. And because of that, there is confusion on who Christ truly was.
Thank you. Next question is from Renata. I have been approached by LDS members regarding the Book of Mormon being a legitimate testimony of Jesus Christ. I would like to know your opinion and at least a few verses, if you know of any, that are correct and true. Also, what do you find wrong with the Book of Mormon? Can you give me anything to use that might help the person who has approached me?
I can't really give you much on the Book of Mormon because I've not read it. And so I don't know a lot about it. But it is interesting that I just watched a Netflix show about murder in the Mormon church. And it was intriguing that this particular old manuscript dealer, this individual, he got hold of a old ancient manuscript which was talking about the story of Joseph Smith being led, by the angel Moroni to find and discover these golden plates, and that this was the basis for the creation of the Mormon faith. But that in this particular story, it speaks about the scribe of Joseph Smith, I forget his name, but he actually tells the story of what's called the Salamander letters or something of that nature. And it speaks about how Joseph Smith, instead of meeting the angel Moroni, that he was actually led by this salamander, this speaking reptile, to discover these golden plates. And that the story that is told, and that the founding of the Mormon faith was different according to this individual who, I guess, he wrote down the real story, and that this individual received a copy of it and was going to sell it and share it with the Mormon church, but somebody actually planted a bomb and tried to kill him and his associates because of their work in bringing forth some of these ancient stories, which, contradicted and also challenged the origins of the Mormon church. And so I found that whole thing interesting, but I don't really know anything about the Mormon church. I haven't studied or read a lot of their manuscripts. I have read some of them, like the Great Price, the Pearl of Great Price, and I've read some of the manuscripts, but I've not read all of them, and so I'm not familiar, and I can't really say with some kind of informed opinion.
Thank you. Next question is from Warren. Now that you believe the Earth is flat, which I do as well, do you still believe the universe is bigger than just Earth and our luminaries in the firmament, and that the Earth is millions of years old? Is there a talk you can point me on this?
I don't know how old the Earth is, but I do know that without a doubt it's older than 6,000 years old. And yes, you can look to the series that we've done on the pre-adamites and the antediluvian world. I've literally released 6 or 7 2-hour shows where I cover and share from the 2-book set that I just released. My I don't know, like 36th and I think it's the 35th and 36th book. Um, the pre-adamites in the antediluvian world, and also the dragon lords, the antediluvian kings. This 2-book set is on the first world age and what is spoken about before Genesis 1:2, where the earth became without form and void, which in the Hebrew is the primeval earth became or becomes a deserted wasteland and an indistinguishable ruin. And the words wasteland and ruin implied that something happened. And in Jeremiah chapter 4, verses 23 through 30, and also Ezekiel chapter 26, Isaiah chapter 23, and other places, 2 Peter chapter 3, it speaks about the first world age and how a time when there was no man, and yet the cities of the wilderness were destroyed. And it speaks about, again, the Atlantean mythologies. And I cover all of this in that 2-book set, as well as in the shows that I did on the world that then was. For this, they were willingly ignorant, just a couple of them. And then, all those that are on the pre-adamites, the antediluvian world, all of that, the dragon lords, the dragon kings. You can find all of those. There should be a playlist for those shows as well.
Thank you. Next question is from Modu. I have been a Christian all my life, but I sometimes still wonder if I'm on the right path. I fear that one day I may wander away because of my growing doubts. My heart seeks him. I'd like to connect with God personally and have a spiritual experience to seal my faith and wandering mind. What are the best ways to experience a spiritual connection with God? Do you recommend a sweat lodge?
I definitely think sweat lodges is one way to connect. But I think that Vision Quest is a good way just to, and even if you're not fasting, but I think God is willing to meet people that are hungry and that are truly seeking the divine, and that the best place is to do what Christ did, go to the wilderness and be still and seek, an appointment with the divine. And a lot of times when you do that and you're sincere and your intent is pure, that God will come and he will meet you and halfway. And they call this an appointment with knowledge. And so, yeah, I think that's the way that I did it. And I think that's the way that a lot of people have done it. And so, just having a sincere heart, but going to a place where you're not going to be distracted by other people or by outside, like cell phones or computers or even the people of the world. Go to a place where you can be isolated, alone, and be with the creation. Watch sunsets, sunrises, and just pray and sit with the creation and speak with God, and see what happens.
Thank you. Next question is from Bart. Do you know of a good children's book that would be a good starting point? My daughter is 12 and is now starting to ask questions about the earth in Yahweh/Yahusha.
Well, not one about the earth yet, but that is something that we are hoping to create as well. But my son just created a children's book based on the book of Enoch, and I think that that would be a good one, and a starting place, because it speaks about judgment and salvation, and so that would be one. All right, we'll be right back for second hour, everyone.
Truth Frequency Radio is your number one source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us the second Friday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for our second hour. I am your host, Zen Garcia. I'm joined by my daughter-in-law, Joy Garcia. This is the Ask Me Anything show, and we will continue with questions. Joy?
Awesome. Yes. To go back to actually Bart's question about good children's books about the earth as well, we actually do have a collection of those that C.J. Austin did. Basically, a recreation of your books, your Flat Earth series, but for children. So we have the Flat Earth Chronicles, The Earth Stands, and Flat Earth Chronicles Under the Dome. And yeah, it seems really, really awesome. Some of the, it is a 4th to 6th grade reading level, but it may be something to get started. I think a lot of adults that are maybe wanting to get like a simpler, quicker version of some of your books might enjoy this as well. But yeah, so I will add the links to those books as well as kind of the links to the young readers category that we have on our website as well. And with that, we will actually move on to the book giveaway. For those who are familiar with our Ask Me Anything series with Zen Garcia, every month we do a book giveaway, and we ask a question, and whoever answers that question first in the live chat on the YouTube channel Zen Garcia will get a free book shipped to them. And I'm going to ask the question, and then Zen, if you could let us know what book you want to give away tonight, that would be great. The question for tonight is, what tribe was King David from? The question again is, what tribe was King David from? So if you're listening live, please add your answer into the chat. And while we're waiting for the answer, Zen, what book would you like to give away and why?
I think the Archico volume would be a good one because of, the people, the questions, and how so many seems to be doubt and uncertainty out there as to the dominion and the divine providence of Christ and the role and the mission that he completed in coming into flesh embodiment. And so I think that would be a good one to inspire and to encourage others with their faith.
Wonderful. And we do have a winner. The winner for tonight is Kanan Biard. Congratulations, Kanan. If you could please email us at sacredwordpublishingllc@gmail.com with your shipping address. We would love to send you the Archco volumes. So thank you so much for joining everyone every month. We're so grateful for your support. And with that, we will move on to the next question. Actually, you know what? We also do, for those who wanted the Archco volumes but did not win tonight, we are going to make a special promo code for you for 20% off, 25% off, and it will be Archco in all caps 25. You can use, Arch, capital ARCH, 25 is the promo code. We'll add that into the chat as well for those who still want the book but did not win tonight. And once again, congratulations, Kanan. And with that, we'll move on to the next question from Carlos. Why does this Enochian calendar use the non-scriptural pagan-derived names of the Hebraic months? Scripture only names the first month of ABYB, and then I can't read that Hebrew, but the rest are referred to by number. This inquiry applies to the use of the pagan English terms for their weekdays and months.
The reason I use those terms is because that's what they ended up using in Babylon. And yes, even in Babylon, they assimilated the Aramaic, and these were the terms. But yes, I know that there were only numbers for the months as well as for the days. But, am I to put up just the numbers? I mean, I think it's easier to have terms and the names associated with these months. And there's meaning behind the names of the months as we include in the Enochian calendar. And so that's why we do it this way. And, you can't please everybody. And I think it's better to have than just numbers and only the first month, a bead or Nisan. And it seems to make more sense to me to do it this way.
Thank you. Next question is from Cyrus. I'm reading the testaments of the patriarchs and prophets, and in the testament of Reuben, he speaks of the 7 spirits of deceit. Could you elaborate on this?
Well, I think Reuben does a good job on that. And I would also include that you could read more about this. There seems to be, and I'm not sure if he actually had read The Shepherd of Hermas, but there seems to be association in that manuscript as well. And that there seems to be correlations with the testament that Reuben gives and with what is written in that ancient manuscript as well. And so I would just refer to those to get better elaboration on those concepts.
Where is the Shepherd of Hermas? Are you asking? Where can you get that book? Oh, where can you get that book? Zen.
You can find it freely online. It was one of the apocryphal books, along with the 13 books of the Apocrypha. They took the Shepherd of Hermas out and the 13 books of the Apocrypha, but with those 14, there were originally 80 books in the King James Version of the canon. And so just look up the Shepherd of Hermas, and you can find it online. I'm not sure if we've actually published that, but if we haven't, perhaps we can do an amendment to the 1611 King James Apocrypha that we have, because it was included with that as well.
Thank you. Another question from Cyrus. Could you share your insight on the first and second resurrection, the tribulation, the millennium, and after the millennium? What happens when the dragon is released from the bottomless pit?
The first resurrection, I believe, was when Christ descended down into Sheol, when he was crucified and died and was separate from his body. That in those 3 days, he went into Sheol as he had promised Adam when banishing him from paradise. That 5,500 years after you are, removed from paradise, that he would enter into the flesh and die. Dying, he would descend into Sheol and bring liberty to the captives. And that's exactly what he did. And as it says in Matthew, I think chapter 25, there were numerous of the resurrected dead seen with him. And Christ was the first fruits of the resurrected dead, and he was also the high priest. And being resurrected on the Feast of First Fruits, he presented Adam and his descendants to his Father, and as the first fruits of the resurrected dead, along with himself, and he was the high priest in the order of Melchizedek. This, I believe, was the first resurrection. And then the second will be at his coming, the second advent, where it says that we will be caught up into the clouds and into the air. And when he, after the wrath of God is poured out on the wicked and those not written into the books of life, that when he takes his judgment seat on the Day of Atonement, because he's going to fulfill the 3 remaining fall feasts, then every knee shall bow, every tongue confess. Everybody will be brought before him, and the harvest will ensue. And those that are wicked will be numbered amongst the tares, and those that are righteous will be counted amongst the elect. And the elect, once it's determined, will enter into New Jerusalem, which will descend out of the heavens on the feast of Sukkot, on the full moon of Tishri, the Feast of Tabernacles. And then, God willing, we will reign with him for the 1,000 years of what is the millennial reign. As far as the bottomless pit and the key, the Apollyon Abaddon opening that bottomless pit, I believe that is connected to the wrath of God being poured out on the wicked, and that the locust army is part of the judgment against the wicked, and that just as we see the elite, even in this day and age, using things like CERN in order to invoke and to conjure demons into this world and to allow them free reign to slaughter humanity, that will actually backfire, and that the restraining hand of the Holy Spirit will be removed in that time to allow them to accomplish their invocations of these demonic entities, but that it will be a slaughter against them rather than normal or regular humanity, and that it will backfire. But that will be exactly, they reap what they sow, and the judgment, the decimation, all of that, of those not written into the book of life, will lead up to what is the destruction of the world, that there will be a new heaven and a new earth before Christ returns, and that part of the seals being open, the stars shaken to the earth as of a fig tree, that they will set the earth ablaze, and that the earth will be made smooth, and the mountains will be brought low, the seas high, the crooked places made straight. It says in the Revelation of St. John, the theologian, and also in the Sibling Oracles, Book 2, and in other places, that the earth will be made smooth and flat, and that she will be white and pristine and pure in preparation for the coming of the bridegroom, that as a bride she will be restored in purity and without sin and washed of hyssop. And so, these things are found in the compilation of the Great Commission 3. And if you want to know more about prophecy and about the end times, that would be the manuscript, that would be the book to read and study. And it does include these 2 books that I made mention, and so many others, the Apocalypse of Elijah and Samuel, the 14th vision of Daniel, so many, the Apocalypse of Moses, the Apocalypse of Thomas. There's so many apocalyptic accounts which most people have never read and don't know even exist, and they're all compiled into this manuscript. And if you study it, you will be more familiar with the end times and the timeline of the last days, in my opinion, than most people.
Thank you. And I also want to make sure we answer the part where he's also asking about the post-millennium release of the dragon. Is there anything you'd like to add about that?
Yeah, at the end, it says that Satan will be loose for little season, and it's surprising to me that he will have a following, and that people will deny the Messiah again, even though he's here on the earth with us. In my mind, the only way that could happen is that these are, truly his children, and that these are the individuals that are dedicated to the New World Order and that are the enemies of Messiah. And that no matter what, they want no part in salvation and they want nothing to do with goodness. They are the embodiment of evil, and they will hold that disposition until the very end.
Do you want to? Okay, we will move on to the live questions. And the first question from the live chat tonight is from Cam Thompson. Hey Zen, what do you think Neanderthal DNA is? Could it be related to the pre-Adamites or something else?
Yes, I do believe it is related to the pre-Adamites, as are so many other hominid type species that we see in the records, that there are many variations of hominids in the ancient times. And so, yeah, I do believe that, that they are connected to the ancient men that were here before modern humanity. And so, and I speak a lot about that again in this pre-Adamite and the antediluvian world series, and the Dragon Lords and the antediluvian kings.
Thank you. Next question is from MJM. Zen, who do you think your audience is? For example, do you think Satanists and or the NWO also listen to your shows?
I do believe that, yeah, there's a wide, eclectic body of listeners, and that people just in seeking truth and that are wanting to better understand the world, and and that includes both sides, both the seed of Cain and the seed of the woman. And so people, in my opinion, there's very few people out there that are covering truth in the manner and in the fullness that we are. And I'm not in any way boasting or bragging. It's just that most people exclude the majority of the extra biblical texts from their knowledge, their wisdom, and their understanding, and their discernment of what's going on in the world, and also how it connects to, not only the war in heaven, but the enmity between the seed lines as it plays out. The harvest, the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep, that unless you understand what happened in the garden, and even what happened in the war in heaven and how it led to the destruction of the earth and the first world age, it's difficult to make sense of what we are contending with in this day and age, and how the ruling elite are all of one bloodline, and how they claim the divine right of kings, and how they believe themselves to be, because they declare themselves, as I show, that they are the children of Cain, and that their father was not Adam. They say it in their own words. And so, um, most people are, for whatever reason, opposed to this information and will not accept it, are unwilling to embrace it, and because of that are bound in ignorance. And I'm not saying that to be to bring judgment or condemnation on anybody. Ignorance is a state of being, and people choose it. And it's just like with what the Most High said, that because they have no love of the truth. And most people, don't even read the Bible, much less all of these other extra biblical manuscripts that we share and cover and have compiled into book form so that you can have them and read and study them yourselves. I mean, make your own conclusions, do your own homework. But I find that when people do, a lot of them reluctantly come to understand truth in the manner that I have shared it and explained it and sourced it from the ancient manuscripts. And so, what I teach, the things that I share, they're from the ancient sources. It's not things that I'm making up. I source everything that I teach. And um, as controversial as my opinions are, these are what the ancient manuscripts say. When you read them in fullness, when you put the puzzle of truth together, this is what you find, and this is what we share.
Thank you. Next question is from Facts Not Fiction. Zen, can you tell us about the origins of Passover? When did it start originally, and how did it change meanings throughout the ages? And the difference between Easter and Passover?
That's a great question. And yeah, so I'll actually share a story about the first Passover from the legends of the Jews. But before I read this, I'd like to state that in my study of Passover and the Levitical holy days as a whole, the 7 that are mentioned in the Leviticus chapter 23, that Passover has been celebrated and is celebrated in the heavens, and that the association to the Lamb is connection with the coming of Christ into mortal form and to the role and the mission that he would play. And that it speaks about how even before the foundations of the world were laid, that the Holy Spirit, together with the Father and Christ, the Messiah, spoke about the creation of man. And the Holy Spirit advised that man would fall away and be led into sin and cause destruction because of being led astray. But Christ offered, even in that time, to come into mortal embodiment and to redeem us, to save us, and to restore us to grace. And because of his volunteering himself, even to be murdered and made fun of and ridiculed, condemned and judged in just horrible manner, that he would die for us in order to redeem us, to make the ultimate sacrifice of giving his life in order to show us the way home. And because of his willingness to perform and to fulfill that role. That, again, the whole theme of Passover and the Levitical feast days, the holy days, all that was established even, with the dictate of the Pentateuch and what was the Most High, the Father Yahuwah, mandating these celebrations and these memorials. That, of course, it was first connected with the lamb that, the blood of the lamb that was marked on the doorposts in order to prevent the death of the firstborn. All right, we'll be right back, and I'll continue.
Every day, questions arise.
Are the stories in the Bible true?
What if I told you that there are hundreds of confirming witnesses,
which give intricate detail to the stories in the Bible?
Have you ever found yourself deep in the rabbit hole with questions that no one seemed to have the answers to? Join us the second Friday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for our Ask Me Anything series with author and researcher Zen Garcia, as he sheds light on the mysteries which have us all searching together.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
Truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. And so I'll continue with what I was stating and try to make this clear that when you read the legends of the patriarchs and the prophets, and also the writings of Abraham, the Perk D. Rabbi Eleazar, and also the Assatir, the book of the secrets of Moses, that all of these manuscripts make it clear that Passover was celebrated in the heavens and that it came down to the earth because it reflected the sacrifice of the only begotten Son and the role and the mission that he would accomplish in restoring Adam and all of us in bringing a forgiveness of sins. Behold the Lamb that takes away the sins of the world, that he is the true Passover Lamb, that he fulfilled the Father's feast days as was given in memorial to Israel to remember the Father Yahuwah freeing them from their bondage in Egypt. And just as the Father had released Israel as the seed of promise from their enslavement, so has Christ redeemed all of us as the olive tree and the fig tree and the wild branch grafted on. That now the whole world has been redeemed through the promise of the cross, and that if we accept the grace that has been extended to us, that we can be restored to our former bright nature, to our first estate, through the sacrifice that Christ made for all of us. And so this is clear in, again, all of these ancient manuscripts. It shows that even the story of Adam in the first book of Adam and Eve and in the primary Adamic literature, that when he decides to set up an altar and to pray to the Most High for forgiveness, that this is on Passover, and that it was on this same altar that Cain and Abel made their first offerings. And, of course, Cain's offering was refused. And it wasn't that, that he, in some of the extra biblical texts, it shows that he did not offer the best of his fruits and his harvest. And so that's why it was not accepted. But that even the story of Abraham and the sacrifice of Isaac, that this portrayed what Yahuwah would do for us through the Son, that whereas Abraham was willing, and Isaac also was willing, as is shown in the real story, that this was not a surprise to Isaac. He knew what was to occur even before they left, and he encouraged his father to bind them tightly and to complete this mission. And Abraham knew that Yahuwah had promised that his seed would live on through Isaac, and that his descendants would become like the sands of the sea or the stars in the sky. And so he knew that even if he accomplished sacrificing him, he believed that he would be resurrected, that he would be restored to life, and that he would, bear him children, and continue the promise, and that even the Messiah was to come to him, would come through his genealogy. All of this was understood. And so even that altar, Noah, that this was, when he disembarked and offered, that these things are also associated to the Levitical feast days. And even the banishment of Adam from paradise, that this occurred on Yom Teruah, the first of Tishri. And I do believe that this is the day that Christ was born in first incarnation, and that in second advent, this is the day that he will return on Yom Teruah, and he will fulfill the 3 remaining fall feasts. And so there's significance to the Levitical feast days, and they are celebrated in the heaven. And that's why we should honor them in remembrance and memorial and connect them to the sacrifice that Christ made for us and of what Yahuwah did for Israel as a nation when he brought them out of bondage and made them a nation of priests and kings. But with that, I'll read the story of the first Passover. And this will also show that it was the Enochian calendar which was restored to them during this time as well. The first Passover from the Legends of the Jews. When the time approached in which, according to the promise made to Abraham, his children would be redeemed, it was seen that they had no pious deeds to their credit, for the sake of which they deserved release from bondage. God therefore gave them 2 commandments, one bidding them to sacrifice the paschal lamb, and one to circumcise their sons. Along with the first, they received the calendar in use among the Jews, for the Passover feast is to be celebrated on the 15th day of the month of Nisan, and with this month the year is to begin. But the computations for the calendar are so involved that Moses could not understand them until God showed him the movements of the moon plainly. There were 3 other things equally difficult, which Moses could comprehend only after God made him to see them plainly. They were the compounding of the holy anointing oil, the construction of the candlestick in the tabernacle, and the animals, the flesh of which is permitted or prohibited. Also, the determination of the new moon was the subject of the special divine teaching, that Moses might know the exact procedure. God appeared to him in a garment with fringes upon its corners, and bade Moses stand at his right hand, and Aaron at his left, and then, citing Michael and Gabriel as witnesses, he addressed searching questions to the angels as to how the new moon had seemed to them. Then the Lord addressed Moses and Aaron, saying, "Thus shall my children proclaim the new moon, on the testimony of 2 witnesses, and through the president of the court." You can read, further. My emphasis on this particular passage was to show that, the calendar was part of the process of the restoration and also the celebration of the Levitical feast days, and that during the Exodus, the Enochian lunar solar calendar was indeed that calendar that was restored to Moshe and Aaron. But if you want to read, about the rest of the first Passover, you can find the full story in the Legends of the Jews. And I believe it's in the 4th book, the 4th or the 3rd, which is specific to Moses and the Exodus.
Thank you. Next question is from Teresa Guerra. What are your thoughts on being a Knights of Columbus? Please answer, since my daughter married a family of Knights of Columbus.
The Knights of Columbus is one of those secret societies that's connected to even like the Knights of Malta, the Knights of the Templar. It's a secret society, and there's nothing much more that I can say about it because I've never been part of a Masonic order or a secret society or initiated in one or have deeper understanding as to what goes on or with them. Even though I do have the Morals and Dogma book, and I've used as source for some of the studies and the things that I've come to know about the secret societies, I don't spend a lot of time focused on the New World Order as far as, all of the secret societies and all of that, other than to know and have read the Secret Covenant and the protocols, which we've published in the Illuminati Secret Covenant and Protocols book. But most of my time and my effort is spent on reading the ancient manuscripts wherever I can find them and in whatever compilation. And even, I mean, every day I'm reading from different ancient sources and ancient books, and I read them over and over and over because, like the Bible, I learn something new all the time. And like, when I discovered biblical cosmology, I went through all of them again just to see what I could find and what is said about the, the as far as flat Earth and the firmament. And, I published a 3-book series on that. But like when I first learned about Genesis 6 and the fallen angels and the giants, I wanted to read all of the extra biblical material just to learn more about what happened with the watchers and the giants that were born, and all of that. And so I read them over and over and over, and I find them fascinating, and I love, studying and sharing what I discover with all of you. So
Awesome, thank you. Next question is from Brandon Roberts. Zen talked about on Rob's and his show about us being stars or angelic beings. I was just wondering what book that's in. Thanks if you have time.
it's in the book of Enoch, specifically. And there was a passage also, I forget where it was. I think maybe it was in the writings of Abraham, and it talked about Yahuwah was making a covenant with Abraham through his word. And he told them to look up into the sky and to notice the number of the stars and the stars that were in the sky. And it was actually an allusion to that the stars that were there, that they could be the ones that would incarnate and to take form as Abraham's descendants. That it was something along that line. And also in the book of Enoch, there's a passage which speaks about that too. And, there's numerous passages that speak about how the stars are the celestial hosts. But the connection with pre-existence is that, in my opinion, before we took on mortal embodiment, we were in some manner like the sons of God, and that we had a bright nature and we were immortal beings, in however and whatever that means. And in the formation of a child, in the Chronicles of Jeremiah, and also on the creation of a soul in the some of the rabbinic literature, it describes how, even when God creates, or when a woman impregnates a man and the physical body begins to be created from, that conception, that God chooses a soul to then enter therein. And that this soul is shown where, it's all entire history. Its life, the people that will be significant in its life, where it will die, even why it should be good, why it should lead a good life, and to follow the commandments and not fall away to, the perdition. And then when it's born, it forgets all of these things. But as we live and as we go through our lifetime, when we have a moment of recognition as to some of the things that we were shown while we were in the womb, just as, Jeremiah, I knew you before you entered into the womb of your mother. I had foreordained you to be a prophet unto the nations. That when we have these moments of clarity and remembrance in our life, that these things represent deja vu or synchronicity. And it gives us a sense of recognizing a higher purpose and a higher calling, and that God is working through our lives and leading us on the path that we should be on. And so I think those kind of things, those kind of moments of deja vu and synchronicity are reminders of, that there is a bigger reason for and purpose to our being.
Thank you. Next question is from Instant Faith. What is your favorite extra biblical Bible story that almost all of us probably have not yet heard?
There's so many. But I would say that the Andrew and Matthias and the City of the Man-Eaters is one of the most interesting. And it's one of those stories which I think everybody should be familiar with, because it shows the depravity of Legion and also of the high evilness that some people allow themselves to be part of. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, in the story of Matthias and Andrew and the City of the Man-Eaters, the apostles have to draw lots to go to different regions of the world to share the gospel and to try to convert the people. And there's a stronghold of this particular region where it's known to be a stronghold of Satan, and that the people actually abduct all the people that travel through their land. They pluck out their eyes, they drug them, and they fatten them up for a certain time of the month and a celebration. And then they bring out 7 of these victims and they slaughter them. They rape and abuse them and slaughter them. And then they cannibalize them and drink their blood. And, this is something that was part of what the apostles had to encounter and overcome. And it shows just the kind of evil that existed in those times. And not only that, but just as the story of the apocryphal book Bel and the dragon that David encountered in Babylon, people in the priesthood that worshiped this particular basilisk, this dragon entity, that there was this living creature which all the people worshipped, and that it was even fed and worshipped and revered. And, and that the people of the City of the Man-Eaters, they also worshipped a particular entity like that. And so, this is something that is little known as to the kind of evil that existed in that world, and how an entire group of people coming under the influence and the possession of Satan, that they could engage in such abomination. And, the elites of the world, even in this day and age, they are also engaged in such abomination and still practice cannibalism and, pedophilia and all kind of high abomination. And so even in Micah chapter 3, verses 1 through 5, it speaks about how the princes of Israel given over to depravity, that they also were engaged in cannibalism and cooking people in a pot in an ancient time, and then of course the sacrifice of children, the offering of children to Moloch and to Chemosh and different entities, and that also continues. Bohemian Grove and all of that. But yeah, so I think that story is one that is of very great interest. But literally, there's hundreds of manuscripts, I think, and it depends on the topic. But that one was very shocking to me, and one that is mind blowing when you read it.
Thank you. Next question is from Gad the Seer. When the Pharisees usurped the priesthood, is it true they lost a lot of their false priests in the temple procedures because they could not stand in the presence of Yah?
Well, I think that, as far as the true priesthood, well, certainly when they killed Zacharias in the Holy of Holies, that and then they usurped the true line, and they killed John the Baptist, who was the rightful heir to the high priesthood, that they became a false priesthood, and that God, Yahuwah, did not have communication with them thereafter, but that communication passed on to those that set themselves apart. And I believe that the Essenes and the people of Qumran and those that, tried to remove themselves from the organized religion, that those are the ones, the voice crying out in the wilderness, that even Christ, that he was part of that legacy of the true priesthood and having the true calling. And that, we see also all throughout that there are different prophets that, the kings don't like and try not to acknowledge, and because of that, they so God doesn't pick priests after that from those that are in authority. He picks his own priests from those that are of the true bloodline and of the seed of promise, and it's usually people that don't have money, wealth, status, and power.
Thank you. Next question is from Dub Mundo. Did David bite the foreskin off Goliath and decapitate him after taking him down with slingshot?
Not that I know of. I've never seen that story. He decapitated his head, but his foreskin, I don't know where anybody ever. I've never seen that in anything. But he did, after he stunned him with a slingshot. He ran up to him, pulled out Goliath's own sword, and decapitated him, cut his head off. But as to foreskin, I don't. Have never read it that way. And I think we probably should end there, Joy, because we're about 1 minute out from break. So,
okay.
And to the end of the show.
Okay, sounds good. I guess we probably won't have time to close out in prayer. Or maybe
no, I think we have just 1 minute.
All right.
But Thank you, everybody, for
you.
joining us. We greatly appreciate you. And if you want to ask questions, just send them in at sacredwordpublishing.com, and we take them in order and in number. And also for Diane on the calendar, Dr. Joy, and also Gary Wayne. If you have questions that you'd like to pose to any of us, please send in your questions for there. God bless all. Shalom.
Thank you.
Good night, Joy. Good night, son.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.